Sean's Vision Studios. This is a 3 BSU students show. Two of the producers are not here, but I have a substitute, Zak Sarkarati.
Sarkarati, yeah.
So, Zak, me and you been friends for what, 1 to 2 years?
So yeah, we first met each other in would have been like what September 2024 in Shelley Murphy's news writing class.
And we've been friends ever since, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
So we was in the news writing class. You want to speak up on the BCC Hawk on how we actually met and what articles that we worked on?
Yeah, well, I thought this was the Bridgewater show, but yeah. So before me and Sean were at Bridgewater, we first met at Bristol Community College. So yeah, we were on. I ran for as long as he knew me, the student newspaper there, the Hawk, and to be honest, I did a lot of work there, so it's going to take me a second to remember what we worked on. I know you did the article. You had a great article about. It wasn't really an article. You did a video on when the commuter rail came down to the South Coast. And I remember one day he called me up. He's like, "Hey Zach, I got a surprise for you." And I'm like, oh. I wonder what this is. It's always surprises with this guy. And he interviewed the senator for like New Bedford area, yep. Montigny, which is like actually crazy. Like some of the like local news stations can't even interview Montigny. Some people think he lives in Florida, but this guy managed to interview him. Did we work on? What else did we work on besides that one?
STEM versus STEAM.
That was the So throughout the entire semester in news writing, we all had a project we had to work on. My project I was working on about the veteran community at Bristol Community College. They got one of the strongest veteran communities in all the state at any college, not the state, the entire country. And what he worked on was talking about. It was a pretty complex topic. He might need to explain it, but comparing STEM, which is science, tech, engineering, and math, and then STEAM, which is includes art in there, which is exploring that. Why is that not used at a higher ed level? I think what you kind of found talking to a lot of people was that STEAM was usually more. And correct me if I'm wrong here. That STEAM was usually more popular to use as let's at like an elementary level. Let's get these kids involved in these hard, complex things with arts, which was something that the kids are usually going to love a lot more than math. I remember you talked to the dean of I can't remember her name.
Adriana
Foster Sheriff, yeah, and a few others too, right?
And a few others. We had to on that project in newspaper writing class. We had to pick up 3 interviews. I ended up picking up 5 interviews during that class.
I only remember.
I went above and beyond. I was just like, yo, the story's not setting well with me. I need a few more other people. And then that just kept on getting another reference to another person to another person. So I was like, all right, Zach, how many interviews can I do here? He goes, how many you got? I said, 10. You came back. You go, dude, try to shut down to like 5 to 7, and that's the cutoff. I'm glad you did that because that's a lot of work when I was working for FRC at the time. And the FRC, shout out to Steve Reyes and Keith Tebow, by the way, for letting me work on that project and getting paid for that.
That's awesome they did that. For those people watching that don't know FRC, that's Fall River Community Media. That's the local TV station in Fall River. They also just happen to run out of BCC.
Yep, and they also do a news station too every Thursday. So I'll give those links up on this podcast when I'm eligible to do the audio editing and stuff. But now that we're here at BSU, let's transition a little bit. Do you see the difference between the Hawk and the BSU newspapers?
Yeah, so here at Bridgewater we have the comment. So I think the biggest difference you're going to notice between the two of them, which has already been quite adjusted for me, is that the Hawk is totally online. Some people will actually mistakenly call it the Hawk newsletter because we don't have. I mean, we have our magazine. We'll do once a year. We're supposed to do it once a year. We didn't actually do it last year. Um, but anyways, back on topic. So the Hawk is really a digital newspaper. We have our website. We distribute it from on Instagram and Facebook and through a newsletter. Um, the comment here, they have a actual print newspaper still. I think I want to say they do maybe like 4 or 5 a semester. I don't really know. I'm not that deep into it yet. So that's like one huge difference. And they do upload those articles to their website, but the website is kind of like in their website kind of exists in the context of the print newspaper. So that's very different. Obviously how you have to go about marketing that's very different. But as a writer, it's a very different experience too. I actually kind of like doing it online a lot more, not just because I mean, well, for one, that's what I started on, but when you're writing online, it's like, okay, I can write like a 10-page article, like I can write a short book, basically. But with the print newspapers, that's not on the table. Like we have our articles are going to be about 350 to 400, or I'd say probably about 250 to 400 words. I think, that's like really comes out to about like half a page to a page of writing. Like I said, so you really need to. It's a big difference, the act of making it and then also, reading it too. You're getting a much more concise article. You need to have it super, super tight. That's one big difference in those two newspapers. Another big difference too, and I don't, and at least how they are right now, is I see the Hawk. We talked about a lot of you know current events on campus. Um, I'm trying to think back to. I mean, there were every now and then you might have an article that wasn't about campus, like that one we talked about with you, where it was talking about the train station,
Right.
or sometimes we might have bigger stories, like I guess also that Steam one where it's outside the, I mean that is talking about like a national thing and zeroing in on the campus. What I've noticed with the comment is that they have a lot more. They're talking about international, national things. Like my most two recent stories I submitted to them. I wrote one about the Oscars and another one about the protests that just happened in Iran. So those are much bigger, much bigger scales on those stories than what we would have been looking at the Hawk. And I think it's kind of interesting too to see like that it is a very different culture there. A lot of the times it seems like, I mean, I've only today we have our third meeting I've been to, so I only know so much. But it seems like a lot of the time we're like we have writers who are like looking into their passions. Like we had one guy who's like, oh, I love the Red Sox. Like we're going to talk about like the Hall of Fame and the Red Sox. Somebody's like, oh, I love F1. We're going to talk about F1. So there's like a lot of people talking about their passions and just like using it as an outlet for that. So it is like really interesting to see, how these different approaches come together.
So another quick question: would you put this into a newspaper article? Hey, student from Bridgewater State University is actually doing a podcast and looking for people to interview. It's almost like doing a newspaper article. Would you consider adding that into the newspaper?
I mean, we do have our our pitch meeting today. I could bring it up that you want me to do that because I mean, yeah, it is good to have those opportunities. I remember at BCC, one thing I'd always talk about with people is how like you find one thing and you realize all these other things are here. So yeah, I could definitely ask them about that. I do have some other stories coming up though, but I mean, I can always hand it off to somebody else as well. But we'll see. Yeah.
So you said that you were working on other stories last time that we talked. How well are those stories, and can you give us any breaking the barrier of giving the audience a spotlight, like how you would
Like behind the scenes.
behind the scenes?
Yeah. So I had two articles I had already, I mentioned them a bit earlier, that I had submitted already. One of them was about the Oscars. Originally, I was just gonna write like a list of like, oh, who got nominated for the Oscars. Like I said, they have a word limit of about like, like 300 for that one, and just to list off everything that got nominated, that took about like 550. So I was like, all right, we need to figure out a different approach. And what my dad said is, well, why don't you just talk about where you can watch the movie? I'm like, oh wow, that's actually gonna have like, you know, after the Oscars happen in like what a month, like people can't really like, it doesn't really matter what was nominated, but you can go back and see, oh, where can you watch? So I was able to rework into that, and that actually worked into the word limit. But then when I submitted it, the editor, Bella, she said, "Look, you have this in a list format. Of like HBO. I literally just written out like HBO, Marty Supreme, this, that, that, and then like." So she's like, you can't print news like that. That's another thing where it's like, this works on the website. When I was on the Hawk, I could do that, but it's like, it doesn't work when we're printing. So then I had to kind of rework those into paragraphs, which I think actually ended up making it, I hope, a little bit more, I think more interesting, because I get to insert some information that you couldn't do in that list style. Yeah. The other one I submitted was about the protests in Iran. Um, I was like really happy to write that article because my grandfather had come from Iran right before the Islamic Revolution, which when they went from being a monarchy into now being a theocracy. So it was like very interesting to like learn about like how is the theocracy running things, how are they, and um, like the current state of the government. Um, that was another one where it's like really tough to write. We're talking about a whole like series of protests, like these giant protests that swept the entire country, um, and then they get suppressed, and then you have like these Western powers trying to come in and say something or do something, and then you have like the fallout and the historical context. It's like once again, if I was online, what I'm used to, it's like okay, I can write like I said like a short book about this, but it's like we can't do that. We have like 400 words, and we need to make this tight, tight, tight. So that's something where I hope I did it well. I don't know if I did though. I'm still waiting on the feedback, but it's there's like some behind the scenes there. Coming up, I also have some articles I'm looking forward to. I want to propose tonight. I don't know if these will actually get like confirmed, but literally last week I went to the board of trustees. Well, I didn't go to it; it was online. The board of trustees meeting. Um, that was like really cool to see how they operated. They had the meetings for finance and then also the meeting for student affairs. Um, Two big stories I took out of that I hope to write. Um, in the student affairs meeting, they said that going from the fall semester into the spring semester, we had the word they used was melt. The biggest decrease of students from on-campus living in what President Clark said was the modern history of Bridgewater. I don't think they said the number, but they said it was a double-digit number. Then they said they really wanted to look into why that was. They had a lot of theories they proposed. They said maybe our living spaces aren't good enough for students. Maybe some students just need a break. Mental health. Maybe some students are failing out of their courses. Maybe students are living with their parents because they have like jobs they need to do instead. So I'm really curious to see what that is. I think this week the vice president of student affairs, she's going to do kind of like an investigation of that. So I look forward to
You forgot the biggest one,
what's that?
the expenses.
The expenses. Yeah.
It's
I don't. Well, I was just listing off the theories they had. I don't know if they actually said that in the meeting. I could be wrong though, but yeah, it is. I remember I kind of wanted to live here myself, and then I saw, oh my god, my tuition's going to double if I live here. Like,
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, it's like it's like living on the South Coast for us. Our communities. Yeah, definitely it costs us a bit. You're taking the train, I'm driving my car. Like that, that's like pretty much a full tank of gas for me, and I know it's a bit for you. Like, but then you compare that to how much is it going to cost me to live on campus? It's like, oh, I'll commute. Like, no question, I'll commute. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of students who realize that too. But I know they're doing research into that right now, figuring out that question. Um, and I really look forward to figuring out and telling people what's going on because I think that could be important in the future of Bridgewater. The other big takeaway I saw at that board meeting that I hope to report on was they had these, I think it was called J. Parker, I could be getting that name wrong now. They had these people come in and kind of assess the campus and be like, oh, like looking at like ways we can improve this. There were some things where they're like, we're not doing this. Like I think they said like, oh, we could do a renovation of the pool and it cost them like 30 million. We're not doing that. One thing I know they said for a fact they want to do is like just like let's do a walking trail around campus, just improve the quality of life. They said it only costs them like a couple thousand. They can do that easy. But I thought the really interesting thing is they had a really in-depth assessment of what does the dorm situation, and they're kind of what they came up with is like they said these dorms are not adequate to the kind of like uh, campus experience that students are looking for here. And we need to kind of figure out a way to how do we make this a more that campus experience you think of. They said that in some of the dorms, like students were living, have like three students in a dorm, and they're like, okay, let's get rid of the three students in a dorm model. Let's turn it to two students in a dorm, and then like get rid of some of these rooms, and replace that with like social spaces. And this is just proposed. They never voted on if they were going to do this or not. Um, sorry.
No, it's fine.
And uh, so that was like really interesting. But then the thing is like the question was then, all right, if we're cutting down on if we're kicking students out to make good space more like lively spaces, um, where does that leave us? And where what they kind of came up with is that okay, the solution is we need to build a new dorm. And President Clark heard that and said, no way are we building anything. And I kind of also want to write a story about that. One, we might be changing up, there might be some shakeups in the dorms, and two, we're not interested in building anything on campus.
Well, speaking of dorms, have you heard the rumor of some of the dorms that's not being used? That's actually part of a restricted area.
No, I did not know about that.
That's a story that you should actually look into and find out why it's restricted.
What dorm are you talking about? I don't know anything about this.
In my last semester, there was a few professors. I don't know their names, so don't.
Saying don't quote me when you're on the record.
I'm not saying don't quote me, but don't take my word for it for right now. What you should do is look into why is some of the dorms restricted. And there's like I said, there was only three professors that told me that they had dorms restricted, but they never gave out the reason why.
Yeah, I would be interested to know that too. Three is a not a. I mean, I would call it a big number. That's when we can kind of start to look at things and say like, oh, there's a bit of a trend here that three people are saying the same thing. Um, that's interesting. Yeah.
Like I said, it's I'm actually wondering why it hasn't been known yet to a lot of students.
I don't know either. I do know over by Moakley, there's those repairs going on there. I don't know if those are dorms though, or if those are classrooms. Do you
Don't
know
know
which
much about
dorms are shut
Moakley.
down?
Huh?
Do you know which dorms are like unavailable right now? Like what part of campus they're on?
I know there's a lot of dorms available right now
Yeah.
because uh I think it's 70%. It's either 68 or 78 uh either 68 or 70% of students that come to Bridgewater State University commute here.
Yeah, I see that sign when I'm at our park at the lot near Moakley.
So there is living space here.
Yeah.
But find out.
I mean, what they said at the board meeting is it said it sounded like it started with full occupancy in the fall, and then since then that's kind of declined, and they said, like I said, some double digit number that they wouldn't say. I think they said it wasn't an alarming number, but they said that number exists. So there certainly is occupancy available right now.
I would say try to find out why that number is a double digit because it should be in the triple.
But trip.
Yeah, it should be like 1 or 200 students staying on campus.
Oh no, I'm talking about a percentage, not a number of students. Like
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, because say 100, that'd be 100% decline. That means no.
No, I meant students that live here on campus. And there is one other question I have. If you could choose which college to be a newspaper for, because you used to be a chief editor, correct me if I'm saying this correctly or wrong. You used to be the chief editor at Bristol Community College.
Editor in chief. But yeah, that was the role. Yeah, the guy who's running it.
Okay, now comes the question. You used to be the editor in chief at Bristol Community College. Now, what are you here? What's your title? You're just a newspaper title? Which one would you rather write for?
Um, I mean, I think honestly, I do think the comment, because it's like I love the Hawk, being at BCC. I had like such a great experience there. So many like great articles, so many great stories, so many connections. Like I really did love the Hawk, but I feel like the way I capped things off there, like I don't know like what more I could have done. Like I really think I had like a really strong run there, and I feel like the run ended, and because the comment is such like a profoundly different experience as news writing, I do have to like force myself to learn new skills. I think if let's say BCC was a 4 year school instead, I would have just been learning. I feel like I would have been kind of deepening those same skills. But I feel like being here at the comment, it gives me a totally new opportunity to learn new skills. Going from web writing now to print writing, it really is a different field of having to learn how to make my writing, turn a full story into 350 words. That's a whole new skill that I have to learn, and I look forward to learning those skills and having that experience here. It's yeah, I look forward to the new stuff.
Last question before I cut it off. At BCC, is there any stories that you wanted to write about but just never got a chance to, or you found out the story was too big?
There were yeah, definitely more than a few stories which got cut on the cutting room floor. I could probably go all day talking about these. My first semester, I felt really bad because I remember I had so many ideas, and then I became the editor. And really, my second semester, I say my first as editor. And then when I became editor, I just didn't have time for it. I wanted to write about the theater program going to Edinburgh, Scotland, for the Fringe Fest. I interviewed Talos Ferris, who's the director of Veteran Affairs, and I wanted to like write a whole life story about him because he's got an incredible story about going from being fighting in Iraq and then like coming back being homeless, and then now he's going to BCC and ending up as the director of Veterans. I'm like, what an incredible story! I wanted to write that. I told them I'd write it. I didn't. So I really wish I had. But then near the end there were some like huge stories which had popped up. But I had showed you this article. Basically, my last article I wrote was kind of the culmination of everything I learned, everything I met, everybody I did. Whoa, said that wrong. Everything I did. um, but basically, I'd shown you, yeah, I wrote this article about this woman, Sandy Ligren. She was the co-coordinator of deaf studies. BCC had only one of two deaf studies programs in the entire community college system in Massachusetts. Um, and then she was a very outspoken critic of the college. She got fired under kind of suspicious circumstances that made a lot of people think it was targeted. So that was like, talking about somebody getting fired, huge effort. It took me like a whole month to write it. Um, and then doing that kind of put on pause a lot of other stories. I was on the verge of writing one about, I was kind of in the early stages of writing one about the disabled students, how in December 2024, the director of disability services was fired, and then they got rid of the Office of Disability Services, merged it into something else, and there was a huge drop in quality for students. Then kind of branching off of that, the deaf students had got like a new partnership for interpreting, and it was like a weak partnership, and it was like, how did we get here? And that kind of would tie back into the why that woman, who was the interpreter for deaf studies, got fired because she was also like investigating that. Um, so that's one thing. I think also a story that I've been working on too was kind of a series of articles about the satellite campus. So BCC is kind of scattered between four campuses. One of those is in Taunton, and their lease on their Taunton campus is expired. And I had written one story about, hey guys, the lease is expiring. And I wrote a second article about how City Hall was working with BCC to try and find a new campus. Um, some campus for people who are at BCC who aren't from BCC. There's all the sports happens at the Taunton campus, and it was very clear from what they had sent out to local businesses that this new Taunton campus was not going to have sports at it. So it's kind of this question of, oh, what's going to happen? And I actually like, went to the diocese, the Catholic Church, and I'd asked the church like, hey, you think you're going to work with BCC again? And they're kind of like, no, we're focused on our own thing. So because they had worked also at a local Catholic high school, so a lot of stories there that could have happened, but that other one took priority over that. I think there were so many other ones too I thought of that just didn't come off. Those are just, I think, a small amount. I think like a big part of my experience at BCC is I'd have all these ideas, and it's like, okay, only like two of them actually get done for the month. Like I think of like 20 articles in a month and only do two of them.
Seems like you had your hands tied up at Bristol Community College.
Absolutely, which is kind of part of the part, which is being a little refreshing to be here. That it's like I'm not running things. I don't have to worry about the budget. I don't have to worry about this, that, and article. I do my thing, and that's nice. That's nice.
If you had more people on your staff, because I think there was like only 4 or 5 of us that was actually more dedicated. If you had more people on your staff, would you say, hey, I could send out some people this way, and you could focus on like one of your stories that you actually really want to work on?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the semester after you left, we definitely had a bit of a slightly bigger group, so I was actually able to do that at some points. We had like I was talking about, like one article I was working on was about the you know how like what's going to happen to sports, and like I was able to go to the diocese, but I was working with another woman, Amanda, on that article. And once that article about that I actually had to do, the one about the woman getting fired, took priority. I said, okay, Amanda, I can't co-write this with you anymore. This is your story now. Like another story too was I was involved on the committee for study abroad planning, and like I really wanted to write about it, but I was like, oh, I can't write about it. I'm on the committee, so I was like, oh, hey, Liv, like, why don't you write about this? And she was able to get some work done on that too. Yeah.
All right,
All right.
this is
This
a
is a
quick
quick
question. Is
question.
there
Is there
anything that
anything
you
that
like
you
to
like to
add or
add or
wrap it
wrap
up?
it up? I think I've talked a lot. If you got anything else to ask, I'll say it. But
No,
no,
I'm
I'm
running out of
running out
time
of
right
time
now.
right now.
So,
oh, okay, yeah.
but
But
anyway,
anyway,
guys,
guys,
this
this
is
is
3 BSU
BSU
students,
students. Minus two plus one.
and
And
this has
this has
been
been
Zak
Zak
Sarkarati,
Sarkarati.
if I say
If I
that
say
right.
that right. That was closer than last time. Sarkarati, yeah.
We're
We're
signing
signing
off
off
and
and
have a
have
good
a good
day.
day.